This is Miss Dorina, and today I'm going to talk about Cortical Visual Impairment, otherwise known as CVI. Now, the reason I'm talking about this today is because a lot of our students have CVI, and CVI can be a little confusing. It looks like your child might be seeing, but actually it's far more complicated than that. So, what is CBI? Well, first, let me talk a little bit about how the brain sees. So, vision is not just about your eyes. That's just where the information comes. Then that information has to be processed in the brain. So if there is any damage anywhere in that process in the brain, then that means that the eyes are taking in information that is not getting processed properly. So, eyes look great, eyes are seeing, eyes are tracking, whatever. Brain not understanding what they're seeing. So that can make it complicated. Now, the best way that I think about this is like a foreign language. Like, for example, I grew up in California. I have been surrounded by the Spanish language my entire life. Doesn't mean I understand Spanish. I took Spanish in high school. I practiced and practiced. None of it stuck. I could never remember how to speak or understand Spanish. I could read it a little bit better, but when someone is speaking Spanish, I really can't understand what they're saying. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with my ears. It just means that my brain has not learned to understand the Spanish language. In context, I can kind of get a little bit because like I said, I grew up in California. The Spanish language is everywhere. I have friends who are bilingual. I've worked in a pear packing facility where the women I work with all spoke Spanish all day long. I've worked in lots of restaurants, so I kind of understand kitchen Spanish. But out of context, just having a conversation with someone, no, I can't really understand what they're saying. And that's kind of similar to what's going on with CVI. Eyes are working fine, but the brain does not understand what the eyes are showing the brain. Now, some people are good, going back to my analogy, some people are really good with languages. Some people can pick up languages, they know 3 or 4 different languages, because their brain is able to take out that information, process it really well. I do not have one of those brains. Unfortunately, my brain hears auditory information and then it's just gone. So that's why you can also see differences in how CVI works. Now, some people think, and they say, and there has been documentation to show that CVI can improve. But again, that depends on the brain. So every brain is unique. Even if you compare all these people with CVI, they're all going to be a little different because everybody's brain is a little bit different. So some students with CVI may indeed improve their vision. They might go from not being able to recognize that there is something smack in front of their face to suddenly being able, well, I shouldn't say suddenly because it takes time, to then being able to see the whole barn when before they could only see one little part of the door. But not everyone's brain is that way. Just as some people in Spanish, they got A's in class. Some people like me flunked. It just depends on the way that the brain processes information. I really wish I could learn a foreign language. Oh well. So anyway, back to CBI. That's how I think of it. When I'm working with a student and all of the evidence, all of the medical examinations show there is absolutely no damage to the eye. The eyes are healthy. The optic nerve, that's the area right behind the eye. It's a nerve cluster of nerves that brings in all of that different information and transports it to the brain. No damage there. Whatever's going on is in the brain. Doesn't mean the eyes don't work. It just means that the brain is having a really hard time understanding what the eyes are telling it. So that's why CVI can be a little complicated. And you may have also heard of, like, there's different ranges and different streams, and depending on where the brain is damaged is what'll affect, like, some parts of the brain process movement, other parts identify. I mean, it's very complicated. And I have a huge chart on my wall to try to keep track, but I don't really go by that so much. It's nice to have clues, but again, every brain, every student is different. So there are strategies you can use that generally work for most kids, like no clutter, one thing at a time. So I would show, as an example, background, high contrast, one thing, bright pink. And I wouldn't really use this item, but it's just this as an example. So if I were to show this and on this background, okay, that's too complicated. Now our brains, if we look at it, take in that visual information, our brains can say, oh, there's a little pink thing in front of this background that looks like a whole bunch of books. But a CVI brain will look at that and have no idea what that is. They don't know what's the foreground, what's the background, what is all of this. It means nothing. So that's why strategies like high contrast, one thing at a time, very important. Lighting, movement, I mean, there are different strategies you use early on, and what you're basically doing is you're training the brain to start to interpret that information, much as when you're learning a foreign language, you start to hear the nuances of the way a word is spoken. It takes time, it takes practice. Some people will have a lot of change and improvement. Some people will have just a little bit. It all depends on the way the individual brain works. So hopefully I didn't completely confuse you. That's just my very, very quick and simple information about trying to explain what CVI is. So, and maybe that'll help you too if, you're talking to a friend or grandparents and you're like, what? There's nothing wrong with their eyes. What do you mean they can't see? You can say, well, it's like learning a foreign language. Or it's like looking at, so here's something too I've discovered, and it's really fascinating. I have a student, or did have a student, not now, in the past, who, when he was moving, he could see. And he did a lot of rocking. And sometimes you'll see kids who kind of move around a lot. As soon as it was still, or they stopped moving, or the object stopped moving, it was gone. And that's the way their brain processed that information. It used movement. So what we had to do was, over time, teach the brain that it's still there by reducing the amount of movement and increasing the other strategies we use. And in time, the student did learn to recognize visual information that wasn't moving around. So that's just one example. And I hope that this will help a little bit. There's lots of webinars. There is so much information on the internet. But when people ask me, what is CBI? I kind of use the example of learning a foreign language. And maybe that will help you to explain it and maybe to understand it a little more. CBI, it can be a mystery. And it's still pretty new in my field. We're still learning a lot, just as we're learning a lot about the brain and the way the brain processes information. And the more we learn, the more we can support and teach. So I hope you find this helpful. Have a great day.